Hey Esther, so this is a video comment for your full speech draft on Mariah Stewart's um, speech, and I am so impressed by the work that you have done on this. So let me just review some things that are super strong that I want you to keep working on and enhance, and then things that are areas for growth that you can pick one or two of those areas and focus on it. I'm also just gonna, as I go through it, point out things that might be little things to change that are more technical. Um, so what I like about your introduction is that it's short, it's brief. The thesis comes at the last sentence. In your introduction, you have just two sentences and you focus those sentences to the context of the speech. So you're keeping it in line with what that blurb says at the beginning of the speech. You're giving us the context of that time and why it's so important that she is speaking at that time. So you're considering the occasion, the exigence of the speech. In your thesis, I like how you start with the as, right? That's a great clause to start with, that dependent clause. As a Black woman, abolitionist and civil rights activist, right here. So that's a great clause to start with to vary your sentence beginnings. And that's something that you'll want to work on throughout the essay, putting those clauses or phrases that cannot stand alone, right? Like this cannot stand alone as a Black woman abolitionist and women's rights activist. That's not a complete sentence, but it is a great beginning to introduce or come before your main part of the sentence, your main independent clause, which begins here. Okay, so we can talk more about that, but this is the kind of thing I was going to start talking about in terms of writing strategy, to vary your sentence beginnings with dependent clauses that begin with as or since or although or while. Okay, so Stewart strengthens the power of her speech through one, two, three. Two, you have this powerful verb, condemn the law, this phrase. And then here you have your message based on the universal idea of advancement. I see division, I see inequity, I see racism, segregation. Okay, all of those universal ideas you can trickle down into your writing from that message. So you start out with your claim, and yep, you have the universal idea from stemming from this message, domination and superiority, and then you have the RD, parallelism. I like that you center your example at a specific point in the speech, with at the beginning of her speech. I like that you're using verbs like employs, right, instead of uses. Yep, and why she's doing that at that time. Why she is um why yep, about society at that time. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up with my eyes here. And then I like how you have the lead in and you're introducing it with a colon. Um, this is great. So this tells me that you understand that parallelism is a rhetorical device that is meant to balance out or to build a relationship between two things, two different things, in order to show that comparison. So I like that you use the balances out, and then you have your two different things, life and death, and then you continue it and say, in order to do what? And that's great analysis connected to the rhetorical device. This sentence here, if you start with and, just be sure that that's an intentional writing choice. Otherwise, don't start with and or but in general, especially in a formal essay like this. I would choose a different transition word. transition words are important because they guide the reader and really help the reader, but they also tell the reader that you have a writing fluency and that you're able to connect thoughts and ideas into writing, and that will help contribute to your synthesis point, how you connect and make your writing coherent with the ideas that you're and the analysis that you're building. Then you get into the word level, absolutely. They. So when I go back up here, what I would just remind the reader that it's repeated twice on either end of that parallel structure, just so they know that you're still sticking with parallelism. Yeah, so you get to the domination, you have that whole universal idea is in this analysis here in different words. So make sure that if you use an although, you're pointing to a difference. So I would maybe choose one of these and it sounds like it's at the same time, right? Because although is really pointing to a different idea. Okay, this right here, you don't need it. This is more read like a reader. This is more talking about more into the in-depth look at her speech. Remember, you are in her subject, right? You're not really analyzing her speech like we would last year in another English class where we are analyzing it for deep reading and the context and the meaning and the universal ideas only, right? You are only interested here. It's like you're laser focused. What are your 3 rhetorical devices? How are they used? How do they help contribute to the meaning? So that's just a slice. So this can go, right? We don't need that information. We just want what you know about the rhetorical devices. So here we go. Stewart is able to give her audience a sense and visual view of reality, that although she may be speaking and advocating the decision of the lives of people of color. So I would just question, what is this, right? It's clear in your head. So I'm going to say clarify what you mean here, especially visual view. It's clear in your head, but we need to know. Okay. So one writing trick to keep your writing focused, anytime that you have 2 things that are connected with and, I just want you to do like, do I need both? And so maybe it's just a sense of reality that although I think this sentence we need to say it like here. I'm going to also say, what are you trying to get across in this sentence? Why is this sentence important to your analysis of rhetoric? Okay, remember, you're not analyzing the ideas in the speech, you're just analyzing the rhetoric. I like how you use phrases like this. That's helpful to guide the reader with that, or in this way, right? So she captures her audience attention. I don't know if you need all this. I think the main thing you're trying to say is capturing, does she use parallelism to capture the audience's attention? I also think you're trying to say something else. And there's something else that you're trying to get across, and I just want you to, maybe a boldness, so maybe explore that, but always connect it to the choice that she made to connect these 2 things, right? Go back up to your focus. The focus is here. She's connecting really life and death. That's what she's doing. And, I would go back I'm going to write you a note, but refocus to claim an example. You have such a good example. Look at all the words in your example, in your quote, because and how they are balanced in structure, right? That's what parallelism is, but opposite in meaning to show a relationship of contrast, right? Between those things. So you have save and kill. You notice the they was the same, which is excellent. Oh, I'm going to lose your comment. You have save and kill. So that needs to be explored. Why on one hand, and what she's saying with that. Okay. That's it's more like read like a writer and not like a reader, right? I think a lot of what you were doing was getting into read like a reader. You were getting away from specific analysis of the rhetoric. So I think this stuff you can pull back on, get rid of, and just focus in on the specific words and how the words are structured. Stewart employs parallelism with phrases that begin with as servants aspire any higher are employed. So in the quote you're pulling, this tells me that I would just change this, because if you're pulling parallelism, how many phrases are we dealing with here? And I guess you need to decide what part of the quote works for you to show parallelism. So sometimes I say, pull the part that is repeated in the parallel structure, and then you can talk about how what comes after is different. I think sometimes it's too complicated to write, or too long of a quote to pull the two pieces that are compared or contrasted in that parallel structure. So I need to go back and spend time to look at the quote, but you know the quote, and so I think you can make that decision of how you're going to cut it and put it in here, and then what parts you're going to talk about that you didn't quote. Because the way that this is written with phrases that begin with, I assume that maybe the phrases are repeated more than once in the speech, so just maybe clarify in a different way, introduce it in a different way. And then how does this show parallelism? Because on its own, the way you've cut it and put it in here, it doesn't show parallelism. So again, decide what you're going to pull, and then decide how you're going to talk about the rest. Take the we out, because you are not involved in it. The second quote needs work, right? So the first example, you got into, I'm going to show you, you got into this right here. And this is an important support tool. This is the exam notes that I put up yesterday. This is what I want you to memorize. If you memorize this, you will get a 6 on May 12th. Like if you do exactly this, and you did this for the most part for your first example of parallelism. The part you didn't do at the end would be audience impact. So I'm just going to make a note, return to the AP essay exam notes, which is what I call that document. Do all 3 parts, including audience impact for each example. So your second example needs more attention, because you have to do the same thing, right, for that you did for the first example. And you kind of like don't, and then you just you need to connect and say, okay, how does this particular example of parallelism convey or connect to this. And so that would have to be drawn out. Like what you did up here is beautiful with the examining the they that is repeated and how heavy that is. And then the two oppositional forces of life and death. But we don't know what is being compared here. You do get into your audience here. If you are going to have two examples in your body paragraphs, you do need a transition between the two, an add-on transition. So the reality is when you are writing in a timed environment, you're mostly just going to use one example and dig into that. It just like you did here, this is perfect, where you have the short quote cut and then you just pull out a specific word. Do that, add more specifically audience impact. And, you know, for every other essay that you're writing from here on out, just do one example per body. You might want to save two examples for the third rhetorical device, because by that time in the essay, you'll know how much time you have left. And if you have time for two, put two in. The reality is most people just do one example. So I wanted you to try working with two just to see what it felt like. So you have analogy and rhetorical question. So you're really strong with your claims in that you understand. It's clear that you understand that an analogy can focus on inequality because, again, analogy shows a comparison or contrast in this extended description. Take out the you. I don't know why that just took out immediately, but take out the you. Yep. Specific words here. Yep. Perfect. Perfect. Take out the R. Remember, don't make it personal. You're getting away from the RD here a little bit, right? So just be careful that you don't sway too far off. Especially when we're in a timed writing environment, we do go in different directions because we tend to just write extemporaneously, right? Just from our head right there. So you have to train yourself to be able to recognize when you are veering off away from the rhetorical device and going into the meaning of the speech. So pull yourself back to the RD and really train your head to think, okay, no, I got to come back. And you do here, but just know that you are veering off. I would change this. Okay, so this is a trick when working with writing. Stewart builds an analogy between employment. So I'm going to write something right here. Stewart builds an analogy between employment. There's many ways you could write this, right? And floating bubbles to illustrate how Black women and Black struggled um, to find employment that was profitable in 1832. Something like that, right? And then you can get into why floating bubbles with unprofitable, dig into bubbles. See, so you're digging in less to the hardship of people finding employment. It's not about that. It's about why the floating bubbles. Okay, do you see that? Um, yeah, exactly right here. It comes and goes as the profit is so little to sustain for anything. You could do a lot more with floating bubbles. I would add to this. This is where you want to go. Yeah. Okay. Esther, I love how you connect your rhetorical device to kind of like the action, right? Or the what it does. That's phenomenal. So here, action, which is made evident by rhetorical questions. Like if you just memorize things like that, right? Um, at least the construction of your claims, it's exactly where you want to be. Um, I just want to read how yeah, great integration. Careful with veering off, right? Do you need that sentence that I've highlighted? Great, attack the minds and hearts. Wonderful. Perfect. I would vary these sentence beginnings. So like one thing you can do is look at the vivid verb list that is all over the place in my stuff for you, but like a simple vivid verb list is right here, power verbs, right? Just you have to vary those beginnings other than employs or utilizes. Okay. Trying to find you, having trouble. Okay. Yeah, so with you, your last example kind of falls short in all three paragraphs. I wouldn't worry about that. In fact, don't don't even give it any attention here. Um, you can start doing just one rhetorical device per paragraph. And yeah, remember that your conclusion goes back to the actual assignment page. So here is the conclusion. Take a look at these notes. You know, two options are you can finish discussing the final, the third body paragraph and like wrap it up, or you can just take a look at the final lines of the speech, the final, how she ends her speech, and do something like this. And then just restate your thesis. Just two sentences. Excellent work. I hope this is helpful to you. Let me know what you're working on and what you decided to change.